And I'd like to welcome into Max on Boxing Now the great Shawn Porter. Shawn, thanks for joining the show.
The great, huh?
I think that when all is said and done, you are putting together a Hall of Fame career. I think you're in the middle of it. How do you feel about that?
Honestly, I'm doing the best I can. I think I've had some really big fights in the past. I think just a few days ago was the biggest fight of my life, probably the biggest fight of this year. I know him and I, Errol Spence and I both, we went out there and went for it all. And, came up a little short. My team, I didn't see it that way, but, that's what the judges decided to do.
Do you think you've ever lost a fight?
The fight with Kell Brook, I thought that fight was close. I understand the decision, and then also the fight with Thurman, I thought that was a close fight as well. To ask me if I think I've ever lost, yes, sir, I do. But this particular fight right here, I think every fight, every round, we controlled the action, we controlled what was going on, all the way up until that 11th round knockdown. I don't think that there was any way he was winning the fight up until that point. I think, if anything, it was a draw.
Which fight do you think you lost in that case? Because I agree, the Thurman fight was tough, another war. The Kell Brook fight was excellent, went the distance, it was back and forth. Which fight do you think you lost?
I would say the first two, Kell Brook and Keith Thurman. Those fights were extremely close. Depending on your eye, depending on who you are, the kind of fighting style that you want to see would depend on, who you were giving rounds to in both those fights. I think with this fight right here with Errol Spence, I think that I controlled the fight from the outside as well as on the inside. And I just think that, I think collectively, whoever you are, whatever kind of eye you have for boxing, I think you would have seen at one way or another that I was winning every round of that fight.
Now, I started out by saying, I said the great, you said the great. I said, well, you put in the middle of a Hall of Fame career, but you probably need more signature wins to get there, right? Danny Garcia, that's a tremendous win. What do you have to do? Shawn, what I love about the way you fight is when the other guy wants to box, you're brawling. When the other guy wants to brawl, you're boxing. You're actually multidimensional. And then afterwards, they always say he was awkward. Awkward is a code word for he's tough to beat. But what do you have to do to get over the hump in fights like Thurman, in fights like Kell Brook, in fights like Spence to actually get the nod on the judges' cards?
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad that you recognize that. That's actually a rule that I've followed in boxing for a long time. You outbox the brawler and you outpunch the boxer. And so that's collectively what we've been able to do is over my career as an amateur and a pro, we've tailored my style to fit whoever I'm boxing against. So with this fight the other night, it was definitely about boxing him from the outside as well as beating him on the inside as well. So, I really don't know at this point what it would take for me to get a decision over a guy like Errol Spence or a decision over, Keith Thurman in the past, also Kell Brook in the past. The one thing that we try to do, that I try to do at least when I go out there and box, is I try to be spotless. I try to be perfect. And it's hard to be perfect in everyone's eyes because, again, each judge has his own perspective and his own, his own opinion of what he's seeing in the ring. So for me, it's a matter of me going out there and doing what you saw me do the other night, leave my heart in the ring and pour it all out and empty the tank. And I don't want the case to be left into the judge's hands. And we were going out there, we were going for the knockout, and we didn't get that, and the worst happened.
Shawn, from listening to what you're saying, are you just going to Shawn Porter harder? In other words, if you're a tough out for anybody, and you showed that. I thought Spence won because I had it 6-6 at the end and he got the knockdown. But I thought you built an early lead. He's long, he's rangy, he hits hard, he has quick hands. He was a huge favorite going in, and you fought a great fight of the year type candidate. There's a reason I wanted to talk to the so-called loser of that fight rather than the winner today, because the inspiration in that fight came from you. As a fight fan, I was inspired by you in that fight, though I thought Spence won by a point. How do you then get the win? I want to go back to that question because you say, I try to do this, I try to do that. It already looks like you're fighting as hard and as well as you can. What is going to be the difference that you can do to separate you in those kind of Keith Thurman, Kell, Brook type fights?
You know what? You got me stumped, Max. I really don't know the answer to that. I think you answered the question yourself when you said go out there and Shawn Porter more. I think that
go harder.
It go harder, you know. And here's the thing, you know, going into that fight, I was the underdog. I was the shorter guy. I was the smaller guy. I was the guy that was going to get knocked out. I was the guy that wasn't as fast or as good a boxer, as good a puncher, the whole nine. And I showed all of that to be incorrect. I showed that I could do all of those things that everyone said I couldn't do. So when you say, what are you going to do? Go out there and Shawn Porter more. If I tell you, yes, I'm going to Shawn Porter you more,
this one
then
goes to 11?
I would hope at this point, I will hope at this point, I will hope that you would understand that and agree that, yeah, he can go out there and fight harder and cleaner and be a better boxer than he was in the previous fight.
I would love to see a rematch with you and Errol Spence. I would love to see a rematch with you and Keith Thurman. I would love to see you and Terrence Crawford. But that's what I'm asking, like, do you become a litmus test to measure the other best fighters in the division against, right? My thought after that fight was, let's see how Terrence Crawford does with Shawn Porter. And you're the one guy in the PBC who has never been shy about saying, I'm not hiding behind anything. Terrence Crawford, give him shine when they're leaving him off graphics and stuff like that. So the danger for you is, in fact, Porter makes great fights. Let's measure Terrence Crawford against Errol Spence by how he does against Shawn Porter. Are you saying, I don't know, there's no way for me to change that narrative? I'm just going to go and do the best I can and let the chips fall?
I tell you what, I don't want that to be the narrative. I don't want that to be, at the end of the day, you know, me being quote unquote a measuring stick for someone else to say, well, you know, he fought this guy this way, he fought that guy that way. Let's see how those guys match up. I don't want that to be the case. I think at this point now, demand a rematch. I want a rematch with Errol Spence. It's not about correcting something. It's not about having a second go at it or anything like that at all. It's about this fight being a close fight. It was entertaining. The world watched it. The world loved it. We can both make money doing this. This is what we signed up for. Let's do it again and give me a shot at doing what I do best, which is taking away everything you do well, Errol Spence, and let's do it again.
I want to talk about Crawford. And by the way, this is no ambush. This is an ESPN show. You fight in the PBC.
I got no problem talking Terrence Crawford at all.
No, it's clear that you don't. But I just want to make very clear that I didn't ask you on this show today to ambush you with a Terrence Crawford question. But there's no way around it. He's in the division. I think he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Do you want to fight? Everyone's talking about Spence fighting Crawford, and that may be difficult to make right now. Are you interested in fighting Terrence Crawford?
I tell you what, I'll have to see Terrence and talk to him about that. I know that after this fight, I know everyone was expecting Errol Spence to win this fight. You know, with no problem, and then move on to Terrence Crawford. That's the fight everybody wanted to see. And I've also seen Terrence say, even if Errol Spence loses to Shawn Porter, I still want to fight Errol Spence. I think what not many people know out there is that myself and Terrence, we have a really good relationship, a good friendship, and we've decided to ourselves, you know, if it's something that him and I want to do, get in the ring against one another, it's a decision that him and I will make. And I haven't seen him since the fight. We haven't spoken since the fight yet, but we're going to push for this rematch. If this rematch doesn't happen, maybe him and I will get together, Terrence and I will get together and see if we can figure something out. I know that he's just waiting on the big fights, and he's waiting on somebody to raise their hand and say they'll fight him. So maybe that is a fight that's down the line, but I'm telling you right now, we're pushing for the rematch.
I had you up pretty big early, actually. And as I'm watching it on TV and on pay-per-view, and the commentary has it about even or Spence a little up. And I thought that was some bias going in, expecting Spence to win. But in fact, I saw you winning most of the early rounds of the fight. But then I believe, and this is no disrespect to you, that Spence is pitched a little bit higher in terms of the punching power, in terms of his length. He's a guy where I look at it and go, that guy could be pound for pound #1. And Shawn Porter is just an excellent champion and fighter, right? Just. Meantime, Spence gets by you by the skin of his teeth. But the point is, you have to work so hard to keep your head up above, with a guy like Spence, that as the rounds go on, it gets, you're expending a lot of energy, and he's able to continue to box and work your body, and he eventually knocks you down. He hit you with a shot that would have knocked out 99% of welterweights who ever lived. Your knees buckle. Yeah. I don't even know, did your glove hit the canvas? Because if it did, it was only for a second. You hop up and you start shouting for him to bring on the fight. What's going through your mind in that moment? I'm trying to watch my mouth. I was mad, to say the least. And I knew Jack Reese was going to come in and start counting. I didn't want that to happen. And when I saw that happen, I just, I'm already filled up, and, the fire just inflamed even more. And I said, let's go. And, when we came back together, I did the best I could to, try to even that round out. I knew it was going to be a 10-8 round, and I did the best I could to, try to even that round out. And then, going back to the corner, the mindset was just finishing this fight and doing whatever I could to at least make it a draw. At that point, I felt like I was winning the fight. I felt that if the judges were going the other way, I thought that that knockdown would have solidified a draw at that point. And so that I knew whoever won the last round was going to win the fight. And, so I went out there and just tried to give it my all. Shawn, earlier in this show, I said that you remind me of Evander Holyfield when Holyfield was a heavyweight. Cruiserweight, he was, he beat everybody. At heavyweight, it was, until he fought James Toney, no one ever had an easy time with Evander Holyfield. Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, Mike Tyson, he'd either beat him or it was hell to fight that guy. But something that Customato and later Teddy Atlas and others have talked about, when two tough guys meet, the tougher guy is actually the smarter guy. Right? They're both tough. They're both throwing punches. The guy with a little bit, whose brain is working a little faster, is the guy who actually winds up tougher. And I'm looking at the Spence fight, and I look at the difference between you and Holyfield in those moments. And the reason I ask you, how do you just Shawn Porter harder, or how do you actually get the W against the Thurmans and the Kell Brooks, and especially the Spences of the world, especially when you're fighting a very intelligent fight early? Can you maintain that in the second half of the fights? Because you're in dog shape, right? So is it an issue of making more adjustments? Is it an issue of staying focused? How do you carry that all the way through the fight and get over the top?
Yeah, I do. I think that it is a kind of a combination of all of that, a combination of, being in supreme condition, which, I've shown that I am, but also being focused in the corner as well. I think the punch that he caught me with that knocked me down was something that we've been working on in camp. We say hold the phone, meaning keep the hands up. And I think at that particular time I was throwing a punch and the other hand was down and I got caught. So it's not really so much as me not being intelligent in the ring or me not making adjustments in the ring, but just sometimes it does end up being a small lapse of focus right there, where it could have been a small lapse of focus right there where I got caught with a shot. But moving forward, I can tell you firsthand, my fight with Kell Brook, the intelligence factor for me might have been at a 5. With Keith Thurman,
he outsmarted
was definitely
you, Kell Brook. Yep.
Yeah, with Keith Thurman, it was definitely right around a 7 or 8, and even with Errol Spence, right around 8.5, about 8.5 to 9. So you say Shawn Porter more, yes, definitely Shawn Porter more, but bring that intelligence factor up even higher as well. So you say, can we go to 11? Most things you have to go to 11 when you're in the ring with another champion. And I think, the conditioning, all of that stuff was already at an 11. Bring that intelligence factor from that 8.5 to that 11, we come out with a win.
That's a great answer. I like your work on TV too, Shawn. That sounds like a true boxing analyst. In other words, to me, not to put words in your mouth, but to me what you're saying is it's an issue of not only experience, but learning from your experience. And that's how you get over the top. Because I completely agree with your analysis. You were a very tough fighter, but not a very smart fighter against Kell Brook. You were a smarter fighter against Keith Thurman. You showed a lot of ring intelligence and experience against Errol Spence, and you're saying that's the thing that takes you over the top. I want to be very clear about something before we wrap up, because I said things in this interview like Errol Spence is, a cut above or considered a cut above. I am a huge fan of yours. You make boxing, you're part of what's right about boxing. Real fight fans love you. If you don't already know that, you should know that. You fight, not only are you gaining experience and you fight with intelligence, and the awkward stuff is kind of a lot of way for other fighters to say, a certain way for other fighters to say he's hard to beat. But you never cheat the fans, always produce action, always show up in shape, and have the heart of a champion. My hat's off to you, and I want to thank you for joining me today on the show.
You got it. Listen, let me just say this. There is only one Showtime Shawn Porter, but there's a lot more guys coming up just like me that are willing to give their heart and everything they got to the sport. So it's not just me. And thank you so much for your time, Max, and we'll talk again soon after the rematch.
Thanks, champ. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.